2. The tropical seas under the bright sunshine were clear enough that Indy could easily see the shark as it cruised lazily past them. 14, 15 feet long at least, and doubtlessly wondering if they were worth the trouble it would take to eat them. "Go away, we taste bad. Really, worst thing you ever ate." "Blacktip, you think?" Mac said. "I didn't know they got that big." They were only a couple of 100 yards away from shore. "Classify it later. Swim!" Indy put his face into the water in an American crawl. You couldn't see as well when doing the Australian stroke, but it was faster, and speed was preferable at the moment. Fortunately, he was a strong swimmer, having spent far too much time in ponds, lakes, ditches, rivers, and oceans around the world. Mac, whose style was more unorthodox, made more noise and bigger waves, but he wasn't far behind. It seemed as if it took forever, but eventually Indy achieved shallower water, enough so he could stand on a sandy bottom with the waves lapping under his chest. Phew! The shark was too big to risk water this shallow. He wouldn't follow them. Mac was right behind him, and right behind Mac there was a big fin. Mac must have seen it in Indy's eyes. He turned, said, "Bloody hell!" and started a high knee run toward the shore. Indy was already moving, but Mac blew past him, churning the water into white foam. He wouldn't have thought the man could run that fast on land, much less in the ocean. They stumbled onto the grey sand beach and fell prone. Once he recovered his breath, Mac said, "They aren't supposed to do that, go into water that shallow." "Send him a telegram explaining it to him," Indy managed. After a moment, Mac said, "Pity I don't have a dry cigarette. All this exercise is terrible for my lungs." "Smoke would calm them." Indy said nothing. Everybody knew cigarettes cut your wind. As much running as he seemed to do, he sure didn't need that. After a moment, Mac said, "Too bad about Raoul." "Yeah, well, if he had taken better care of Rosita, we'd still be in the air." It was a poor joke, but what were you going to do? Raoul was probably feeding the shark's cousins by now, and bits and pieces of the shattered plane would likely be washing ashore for weeks. Done was done. The Cuban must have known how dangerous flying that overloaded aircraft was. It was part of the risk he took. Some you won, some you lost. "Hello, have a look," Mac pointed. At first, Indy wasn't sure what he was seeing, but then he was. "My hat." He managed to get to his feet and to the hat. He picked it up, shook the sand off it, and put it on. He suddenly felt better. Things could be worse. Yeah, they had crashed into the sea, but they were alive. He had his whip, his revolver, and his hat. That was a good sign. Nothing was broken. The day was definitely looking up. Mac said, "I've been meaning to ask you, how have you managed to keep that blasted hat in one piece? You've had it as long as I've known you." Indy grinned. "I've had it a lot longer than that." Mac raised an eyebrow. "I was 13, almost 14. It involved the cross of Coronado." "I've heard of that. Gold, precious stones. Supposedly had a sliver of Christ's cross tucked away in it." Indy nodded. "Yeah, if every silver of wood that's supposed to have come from that cross got piled up together, it would be bigger than a giant sequoia. Anyway, I swiped the artifact from some tomb raiders, but Fedora outfoxed me." "Fedora?" "I never knew his name. This hat was his. I think he took a shine to me after we went round. Gave me some good advice, and this hat as a consolation prize." "What was his advice?" "Essentially, you can't win 'em all. Sometimes you have to wait for another day." He was right. Eventually, I did collect Coronado's cross and got it to the university's museum. "And you still have the hat?" "Yeah. I get it blocked and dry cleaned when I'm back in civilization. Use a hat jack when it's in the closet. Had the sweatband replaced 8 or 9 times. And, well, there are hat makers who can repair a tear or a hole in felt. It costs an arm and a leg. For what I've spent on this fedora over the years, I could have bought my own haberdashery. Mac shook his head. Hey, everybody has to be someplace, Indy said. And when I'm here, I want my lucky hat. Lucky? I'm still breathing, aren't I? Mac grinned. What say we go and find some locals and see where we are, Indy said. Where they were, it turned out, was not far from a dirt road whereupon a large and ancient flatbed truck was passing. Indy waved it down. The driver, a dark-skinned native, had a cab full of passengers. 3 adults, 2 children, a dog, and a small pig, maybe a couple of chickens, which Indy heard but didn't see. The cab was missing the windshield, side windows, and most of the roof, over which a dirty sheet had been draped to provide shade. Bonjour, the driver said. Indy could get by in various dialects of French, from Paris to New Orleans, and he asked if they could get a ride. The driver agreed. They'd have to sit on the back, which was piled high with bales of long, sword-shaped green plant stalks, but it would be better than walking. The driver was heading south to St. Mark, he said, a few hours away. That was the direction Indy and Mac needed anyhow. Merci beaucoup, mon ami. The back of the truck had a fresh, peppery smell from the cut plants. What's this lot then? Mac asked. He waved at the plants. Sisal. They use it to make rope. Not generally good as the best hemp, but since many of the countries where that grows are still in Japanese or German hands, there's a demand for it. It's named for the Yucatan port where most of it used to be shipped from. Though they don't actually grow it there. In the New World, it's believed to have originated in Chiapas in southern Mexico. They raise it in tropical countries around the globe, South America, Asia, and the best grades come from Africa. Historically speaking, the crops are about Mac cut him off. Thank you, Professor Jones, for that fascinating lecture. Will there be an examination on Monday? Hey, you asked. No, I asked what the plant was, not for its bloody life story. That's your trouble, Mac. You have no depth. You need to expand your education beyond grave robbing. Learn from sociology, biology, anthropology. A little history would be good. Both of them smiled. Indy stretched out, exhausted. He pulled his hat down over his face. It was warm, and the rutted road and bouncing ride were less than ideal, but it took only a few minutes for him to drift off to sleep. He had been looking forward to getting back to the States and taking it easy for a while. After all the long days and nights island hopping in the Pacific, and then the weeks behind the lines in Germany. But sometimes you just had to go where the trail led.